But we also saw, as these conversations were happening, Russia continue their military attacks, targeting Ukrainian cities, killing Ukrainian civilians.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by defense reporter Mike Brest. Mike, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had made what some consider to be provocative comments about NATO and Ukraine, and just sort of the broader U.S. defense posture in the world, especially with regard to Europe. Talk a little bit about what he had to say.
So earlier this week, Secretary Hegseth embarked on his first trip overseas as the Secretary of Defense, where he's met with leaders from Ukraine, he's met with NATO leaders. He's done several events that Secretary Lloyd Austin did every month when he was in the position. Now, though, the current administration has taken an entirely different posture towards the war in Ukraine. It is the Trump administration's belief that they want to see this war come to an end. And so Secretary Hegseth made some very stark statements when he said it was unrealistic for Ukraine to believe that a negotiated settlement that they would embark on would include reverting back to the 2014 borders, which is a reference to when Russia annexed Crimea back now over a decade ago. He also said that he does not think, or the U.S. does not believe, that a negotiated settlement would include a pathway for NATO membership for Ukraine. Both of those are things that President Zelensky has really harped on for over a year now, as the war almost reaches its third anniversary. And so there were a lot of critics of the administration who viewed that in conjunction with President Trump's announcement of negotiations happening soon, that they were really limiting or reducing some of the leverage that Ukraine had. Now, Secretary Hegseth pushed back on those sort of that plot or that discussion, that debate, that criticism that he got, and said he was just telling realities that everyone knows to be true, and that the leaders involved in these negotiations agree with, which is that the war has gone on for a long time. Russia currently holds about a fifth of Ukrainian territory in the south and in the east, and no amount of hope or strategy can really change those facts on the ground, as we're in a protracted battle at this point.
So President Trump has spoken with Russian President Putin, Ukrainian President Zelensky. It looks like they're going to really begin the negotiation process for some kind of a peace deal. What have we heard so far?
So we've heard that President Trump dropped this announcement the other day on Truth Social that he had an extended conversation with President Putin where they discussed ending the war.
Which, as far as we know, is the first U.S. president to Russian president direct contact in something like 3 years.
Exactly. And so it was a very dramatic statement to be shared on social media, for example. That's the first we were hearing about it. But that's sort of the administration we live in right now. And so the president announced that they had this extended phone call where they talked about a number of different subjects. And in it, he announced that they would start negotiating an end to the war. And in the statement about his conversation with President Putin, he said he would then call President Zelensky and tell him. And so that also contributed to the narrative that Ukraine was being left aside or left behind in these negotiations, considering the president had already agreed to come to the table without talking to President Zelensky first.
So what are some of the issues that are considered to be kind of sticking points? Because it sounds like they are getting close to there at least being some willingness for territorial concessions. But what are people really looking for here?
So there are two separate sort of discussions going on. One is this discussion of how the war will come to an end in terms of what Ukrainian territory that's occupied by Russia would become Russian territory, if the Ukrainians would allow for that to happen. But we also saw, as these conversations were happening, Russia continue their military attacks, targeting Ukrainian cities, killing Ukrainian civilians. And so as these negotiations are ongoing or begin, it's important to note that until any deal comes, we're still seeing active Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities.
Has there been any talk of a ceasefire like the one currently going on in Gaza, although the ceasefire in Gaza it could be in jeopardy as well?
There has been very little to go towards in terms of that type of deal. However, one thing we did see is we saw a prisoner exchange this week. We saw Russia agree to give up an American teacher who had been holding on drug charges for several years that the U.S. had determined this individual to be wrongfully detained. And in exchange, the Trump administration agreed to release a Russian cryptocurrency money launderer.
Thank you, Mike. You can read Mike and the rest of our national security team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.